Alright, so this is the end of what we'll get to this morning. It's very, crude, if you will, and I'm going to scrub through here, and you can start to see on the full color screen, if you will. This is the scope coming down, and it gets to a point, and you may notice here there's a little bit of a flexibility at the end. In other words, when I do this, you see how the distal end of the scope is moving while the remainder of the scope is staying pretty still. Alright, so we're going to go through trying to construct that. And what we basically have then is two SplineIK handles, and they're constructed in two different ways. One's the way we talked about, and the other is a little more unique, or is new to you at least. So let's go to an earlier phase of this. I'll hide the aorta because we don't really need that. So everything here is a little similar to what we did the other day. I've got a stack of joints. I've got a cylinder. I've used the grid to give me something of a coordination between where the joints are and where the edges are of the cylinder. But the new thing, the unique part compared to the other day, is at the distal end of this, I've added a collection of joints much closer together, and I've added additional edges here so that I have more vertices to work with. Okay, so this is the part of the scope that actually does, the most intricate movement. This is where the camera and the light and the whatever instrument is coming out of the scope will occur. And we'll talk about, when you come back, just basically creating some of those items and having them attached here. But if we can learn how to move the scope, I think we can do everything else will follow suit, so to speak. All right, and I've got a curve, and I'm going to ask that you kind of trust me here a little bit. This curve is not long enough, all right? And rather than me show you that, where I put the rig onto the surface and then bring it over to the curve and find out, oh poo, it's too short, and then have to take everything apart, I'm going to show you what to do if you find out you've got a curve that's too small. One of the easiest things to do is just create another curve. And I'll use maybe the X key to just kind of snap it to the grid, because I don't want it. It's actually not going to do anything in terms of the animation. It's just there to have my scope out of the frame, so at the initial part I can bring it in. So I'm going to hit return until I'm done. Now I've got two curves, okay, and I'm going to go under. I'm still in the modeling set here, and I'm going to go into the curves menu, and I'm going to say attach. Now the attach has, this is the way I have it set up, it's going to blend. In other words, it's going to recognize this gap. It's going to move each of these curves 50% of the way that needs to be changed, so that when it attaches, it now has a blend. Now here's a critical thing to watch. And we talked about this with curves, and it may not be something we remember. The curve has a starting point. It has a direction. Okay? There's a square up here. Let me see if I can get a little bigger so you can see this better. If you notice, there's a square and then a U. So that represents the start and then the second point in this CV curve. And you want to make sure when you work this out that you have your curve going in this direction. In other words, you want to make sure that you do have that square up here. If you have the square in the opposite direction, what will happen is your scope will want to go backwards. Okay? So this is the direction it's going. It's starting here with the square, going towards the U, and then continuing. Okay. So let's take this cylinder, and and we'll move it over in place. Again, since I use the grid, I'm going to snap it, hold down the X to snap it, so I'm snapping it right across. Wow, would you do me a favor and just partially close that door to kind of kill some of the noise out there? Thanks. Okay, so we've got the curve in position now. So what do I got to do next? What's the first thing I need to do? Because I want to skin it now. What's the first thing I got to do? Tess, what's the first thing I got to do before I can skin it? What's the next thing I have to do, actually, I should say, before I can skin it? What's our mantra? Yeah, you do. Delete history and freeze transformations, right? Because we got garbage on here, right? And this is really critical, because if you don't do this here, what's going to happen, and again, I don't need to show you this, but this is what happened to me last night, you're going to get that negative 0.4 translation X. The curve is literally, the surface is literally going to be that far away from the curve as it animates. Okay. So we want to say edit, delete by type history, and modify freeze transformations. Okay. And now, let me get my outliner window real quick. So there's my cylinder. I'll call it scope so we know what it is. Here's my joint. That's the top of the hierarchy, the root joint. So we'll call it root. And scope. And then we'll go under, I'm sorry, I got to get to the rigging menu here. And then we'll go under skin, bind skin. And let's make sure I have the right kind of binding. So in this case, I do want the joint hierarchy. Okay, I want this to be averaged. The vertices of the cylinder, I want them to be averaged. Okay, I'm going to say bind skin. And now theoretically that works. So we can test if it works by grabbing any one of the joints and rotating it and seeing that we've got it. Okay? So it rotated fine, or it's attached, skin, okay. And what I'm going to do is quickly stop our recording.